Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. I have another amazing guest here for you today, Mr. Uzzi Sultoni. Starting as a war refugee and navigating life as a first-generation immigrant in Canada, Uzzi's journey has been one of resilience and transformation. From facing adversity such as dumpster diving as a teenager and overcoming a life-changing medical condition to building a $1 million business with innovative technology and minimal staff, Uzzi brings a wealth of diverse experiences in business, self-development, and overcoming challenges. Uzzi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate your time. And hello, everyone who's listening.
Well, we definitely appreciate your time as well. Before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I mean, for all those that watch anime, I think they're gonna definitely understand this one because it's a very, very popular anime. For me, I watch a lot of anime personally. Of course, I watch some North American stuff as well from Marvel, DC Universe. But really, the main character that I resonate the most is one that's named Asta from Black Clover, and that's a Japanese anime. And the reason why, I mean, it's a fantastic anime in my opinion. Very well developed. Character development is good. Plot is good. Everything is really, really good in it. And why I resonate with him the most is because he's this kid growing up without any sort of powers or as called magic in the show. And his dream is to become the king of all the magicians within their kingdom, their Clover kingdom. And the thing is, though, he doesn't have any magic. But my favorite thing about him, he never ends up giving up. And throughout the entire show, you see him go through a lot of training, a lot of adversity, a lot of criticism, a lot of feedback, but he never gives up. He ends up being this teenager who's just super strong because he constantly worked out. Despite having no magic, he ends up having magic in a different kind of form, in a form where there's a sword that appears out of nowhere where he's protecting his brother, and that sword ends up being a magic absorbing sword. So coupling that with his insane amount of strength, he just becomes one of what's called wizards, the best and the strongest wizards in the show, even stronger than some of the captains that are actually there in charge of the guild. I mean, for those that haven't watched the anime and are getting into it, Black Clover is definitely one that I recommend. It's a lot of cool characters, and they do have a lot of characters that I'm sure a lot of people would resonate with. But for me, Asta's my soul brother, who I think if I was in a cartoon or anime, I'd love to embody that as a whole. So Asta for sure from Black Clover.
I like that. I like that so much. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Why don't we dig a little bit more into your story, your journey, and sort of how you got to be where you are today?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, we can sit here and talk for hours about that because really the journey that I've gone through, well, as a kid, primarily my parents, of course, they were the ones that really got me out of. I'm originally from Afghanistan, and we immigrated to many different countries before we came here when the war was at its peak. And I was about 40 days old when my parents fled the war as refugees. They went through a bunch of different countries until we landed in Tajikistan, where I remember pretty much most of my childhood from the age of about 4, going through Pakistan and a bunch of different countries there as well, but eventually landing in Tajikistan for another period of 8 years, where lots happen, lots of hardships. I don't wish anyone to be a refugee ever. At the same time, for those that have been and have been displaced by things like war and other unfortunate circumstances, it's difficult. And I give it credit all to my family, to my parents for getting us out of a place like that and into a place like Canada, which is one of the best countries in the world, hands down. Kind of expensive, but you know what? You get what you pay for. Very cliche saying. And you know what? Very fortunate to be here through all the trials, tribulations, and you know, you mentioned it best yourself. We were dumpster divers at one point. That's how difficult it was. Of course, very embarrassing, but that is something that we had to do in order to assimilate in a more and transition into more of a affordable lifestyle because we really didn't have anything. And as much as the government supported us, of course, with housing and subsidized housing and many other efforts that was there. And that definitely did help us with our transition. The cost of living was so high that we still had to resort to extremes, food banks and everything else that we had to survive on. But despite all of that, my family now, we're very lucky. We're very fortunate. Every day I count my blessings and have gratitude exercises with my partner because of things like these, right? My brothers, my sisters, they're all have their own comfortable careers, their own houses, their own vehicles. Their kids are very happy. And I hope and I wish that they never have to go through some of the struggles that they have. Landing in Toronto and being there for a very, very long time, that's where I learned a lot of what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And as a young adult growing up and going through university, figuring out that maybe the academic route is really not for me, even though I graduated and I loved what I did, which was primarily sciences, I really discovered my passion in business soon after. Knowing that kind of mentality going through university, saying, you know what, I want to pivot and I want to get into something that I really enjoy doing, which is running my own business. In a lot of ways, I gained that knowledge and that experience through automotive sales that I was in for a few years. And I really, when you are doing sales in a different dealership that you don't necessarily own yourself, it is kind of like leasing an office space and running your own business and referral base and a lot of, I guess, again, in general, just running your own business. So I found that to be a passion of mine and I just pursued that. So when we moved finally here to the West Coast, just recently, about almost 4 years ago, I decided, maybe it's time. Like, there's never a better time to actually pursue your dream than right now. The best time, well, they say, I don't know exactly how the saying goes, but from my understanding, the best time to do something was yesterday, but the second best time to do it now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. Do you know how the saying goes?
I know what you're trying to say, but yeah, I think it was something along those lines. The best
Yeah,
you start something is yesterday, but the second best time is right now.
right now, yeah. And I kind of like going with that philosophy. I gotta get my stuff together. I gotta bring value to people of something that's missing on the West Coast. And the rest was history. I just started working, put my head down, what I call the blinders, the horse blinders, just pinpoint, razor sharp focus on one task and one task at hand, which was to build something, build value, see what's there, see what I'm passionate about. Obviously, that was number one for me because I went through a lot of, again, hardships that made me realize and gave me the insights that I needed to know exactly what I wanted and what I didn't want. And ultimately, I realized what I really needed in my life was calm, peace, serenity. And most importantly, because, that's what you do most of your waking hours, is to do something you want to do professionally. And of course, that takes time to understand and get to at a point where you're really enjoying what you're doing. But I told myself, if it's not something I enjoy doing, I don't want to do it. So here we are now. I love my life. It's fantastic. I can't, all thanks to, again, my parents, big shout out to them, but I love my life. It's great now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that. Such an amazing story, and great inspiration to, I'm sure, to many people. I'm curious. You mentioned that you started out in the sciences and then you sort of wanted to pivot into business. Do you remember any sort of like pivotal moment or like that aha moment where you really decided that's the change you wanted to make?
It's a controversial statement I'm about to make, and I don't want people to get the wrong impression of where I'm coming from here. So I'll preface this by saying that I am someone that went through 5 years of university, college, of course, high school prior to that, middle school, etc., etc. One thing I learned throughout the entirety of it, and as I grew up more and more, is that a lot of what you're taught in terms of the technicality of things, of like memorizing specific words, specific historical events, specific people in history, they're very irrelevant in our day-to-day lives. And again, controversial statement because yes, you can use those technical knowledge, but those technical knowledge is usually based off of what you want to do. So if you're learning history you got to be really good at history. So you have to learn those people's names because they brought about a lot of value to people and passed on a lot of fantastic information and knowledge and experience that inspired millions, billions, depending on who they are, which is great. But if you end up at a job or a profession that has nothing to do with history and all you did was study history, unfortunately, and pains me to say that it was a little bit of a waste in terms of gaining that technical knowledge. And ultimately, that technical knowledge, more widely now than ever before, is available through online means, and they're all free. So for me, going through that entire, again, gaining that technical knowledge, and the preface as well is that I studied human biology, mental health and psychology, in addition to environmental science. And fortunate because I feel like a lot of what I learned in psychology, color perception, money perception, numbers perception, I implement on a day-to-day basis, data analysis. There's a lot. Again, I'm very fortunate that I was able to adapt that. But I feel like a lot of people go through their entire educational experience and gaining that knowledge, unfortunately, don't end up actually using that technical knowledge in the real world. And realizing that was really the pivotal moment for me, because on my last year of university, I was like, man, I went through all this time and now I'm going to choose to do business. I really wonder how much of this technical knowledge, like Freud, we learned a lot about Freud, who was, one of the forefathers of psychology, mental health. And I find myself like, how many times have I actually mentioned his name or actually even utilize some of his learnings on a real world application? And I found myself asking very deep questions like that. And I soon realized that, what, maybe gaining those technical knowledge is not for me. Maybe gaining that overarching information and, how to lead, how to manage projects, how to do things that are pertaining to what I do now is really what I need to learn about. And a lot of the times, those kind of overarching and more of a high level thinking and actual actions, they do come from real world experience. So I'm like, gotta get in on that, gotta learn the things I want to learn with the ambition to actually do better and in what I want to do versus what I feel like I have to do, which again was in previously to that very biased in a lot of ways because, for me and my household, my culture, although you're not really forced, you're indirectly, there's seeds that are planted as a kid and it's kind of watered as more of a, this is the kind of system that you should go through, as opposed to, hey, you know what, do what you got to do, figure out what it is that you want to do and just kind of pursue that. And I'm here to support you. But at the same time, everything in life takes you to a place of insight if you're critical about it. And if you're actually thinking deeply about it, why is it that I'm going to university? Why is it that I'm learning the subjects that I want to learn? Why? And if the more you ask these questions, the more you realize what it is that you really want to do and what it is that you really enjoy doing. And ultimately, that's what it's about. It's enjoying what you want to do and what you are doing in the moment. At least for me, anyways.
I love that. And I really don't think that that's controversial, really. I mean, it's on a personal level and on from a standpoint of society on a personal level, I don't think that's controversial at all. It's controversial maybe at the system level, but it's only really controversial at the system level because, and I tell my daughter this the whole time, and like every day I literally tell this to her, is that school does not teach you to, it doesn't really prepare you for life. It doesn't prepare you to be an entrepreneur. The only thing that school really does is, it teaches you how to conform and, operate within, a set of rules. And you're there to learn how to interact with other people, yes, but you're there more importantly to learn how to.
Yeah.
When I coach people who are in university right now and they're telling me, Chris, what am I going to do? AI is coming out and I'm halfway through creative journalism or I'm halfway through, design. What's going to happen? And I said, you know what? We live in unprecedented times, yes, but I mean, this is exactly the same story as it was in the 80s, exactly the same story as it was in the 90s, exactly the same story as it was in the 2000s. There were tons of people that had, programming degrees, science degrees, bachelors of science. They were running around driving taxi cabs, because they weren't working in a field that they studied. And sure, you could look at that time as being, kind of wasted, but it's more about, again, just learning how to learn, and like you said, discovering more about yourself along the way. So just that being said, and just going into that topic, we got a little bit on a tangent there. What do you think procrastination is to you, and how do you define it?
That's a good question. Personally, and of course, there's a clear definition of it when you open up a dictionary, but to me, procrastination just means, but it's hard for me to personally define it because I do feel like, by definition, there's things that you do, or in a lot of ways, a lack of doing that defines procrastination. But I'm the kind of person to take meaning out of everything. And it's kind of like a weakness and a strength of mine, where it tends to make me overcritical about myself and makes me overthink a lot, of course, about things sometimes that I shouldn't be overthinking about. But at the same time, I can't help but to feel like in those moments when, let's say, I am doing things or not doing things, that I am procrastinating. I'll give you an example, right? I know it sounds very vague and you're like, what are you talking about? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes I just like to take breaks. I know everybody does. At the same time, for me, that's a huge luxury. Leading a team, leading a company. These are things that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have the time for. They can't just take a break because there's always something that's going to happen. So in those moments when I am taking breaks, and sometimes the breaks could be, going to the gym, that to me I see as procrastination. But at the same time, that's not really a procrastination for my personal life, right? Because if you look at it professionally, that's a huge procrastination and a huge no-no for a lot of entrepreneurs and emerging business folks, that you can't spend time on yourself. And that's not by choice, it's by circumstance. And a lot of people choose to be in that circumstance on a day-to-day basis with every single choice they make. But I've realized that, to me, that's not what a fulfilling life looks like. To me, what a fulfilling life looks like is tending to every facet of your life, which goes beyond just your professional and career. That's just one of many aspects of who you are, what you do, right? Who you are physically. I think physically, it's probably one of the most, and I only recently, unfortunately, realized this the past 2 to 3 years, that you got to take care of your body. We're all aging. If you don't actually pay attention to what your body's saying, going through pain, there's a lot that people go through on a day-to-day basis, sometimes by choice. And so taking that into account, that life is more than just what you do, you need to tend to that. You need to tend to your soul, right? Which is another aspect of you. Spirituality is a huge aspect of who you are as a person. And so, yeah, in one way, you're procrastinating on one thing by definition, but in another, you're gaining something else. So putting the two and two together, I don't know if I fully, and pardon me, because obviously, maybe this is what your show is all about. I don't know if I believe in procrastinating, because even if you sit there on your phone scrolling, there's always something to be learned, which you can apply in your life, sometimes immediately. Sometimes you water plants, which grows into a tree over time, right? A small idea that you're like, oh, that's a really good idea. 5 years later, you're like, wait a second, I saw this somewhere. And it seems like it's a deja vu, but no, it was a reel that inspired you to now become an entrepreneur. And it took a while for it to get to that point. But it was at a point where you were procrastinating. You were just going through doom scrolling, if you want to call it, at a point that maybe you were one of the lowest points of your life. But at the same time, I don't know if when I'm in those moments where I'm wasting time in one way, I feel like I'm gaining in another, right? I'm working on my intellect, I'm working on my body, I'm working on my experience, I'm working on my education. I want to get back into education and kind of learn more things about myself and about the world and real applications of how I can be better as a person. But again, that could be looked at in a lot of ways as me procrastinating, let's say, I'm not in touch with my family as much as I should be. And I feel all the time that I'm procrastinating on that. But at the same time, in a lot of ways, I'm not procrastinating other things because my time is being rerouted into something else that I may enjoy more or like doing more. And I know that I have to do in order to get to the next phase of my life and kind of evolve into who I see myself as. So again, the short answer, I don't know if I can really define it in a way where it may be suitable. I personally am the kind of person to get the most out of every moment, whether it's literally doing nothing on a couch or just being out there and trying my best to do whatever it is that I want to do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's unpack that just a little bit because you actually touched on a subject that is very it's shrouded for sure. And I always come out and my view on it is that you're not broken, you're not lazy, and like you said, we put so much emphasis on action that we, in a specific sense, that we don't really stop to realize that we're human beings, we're not human doings, and sometimes just being is enough. And to go back to your gym example, I mean, just we'll leave everything else off the table for a moment, but let me ask you something. When you are not happy, when you are not well rested, do you do well in your business?
I think a lot of people would resonate with me when I say no. I guess it depends because science is starting to show something else. For example, when you're hungry, you perform better, apparently. And I know that, especially if you're, going to the gym and have like a very active lifestyle, whether it's what you're doing professionally, it's manual labor and stuff, you need to eat. It sounds counterintuitive, counterproductive, because you're impacting your body in a different way than what it's used to and how it should be treated. But at the same time, apparently mentally, you perform better. And so I guess there's things that you can kind of oversee, but there's things that you can't oversee. For example, sleep. When you're skipping out on your sleep, it's one of the worst things you can do because it doesn't just have an impact on your next day. The older you get, the more you realize that if I miss, let's say you pull an all-nighter out of circumstance, it impacts your entire week, at least for me. You're getting back into that routine. You're trying your best to sleep on time. You're trying your best to wake up on time. A lot of people can do it. I have my cousins, some of my best friends who go to bed at 2 and wake up at 6. They're like dive hard workaholics. I can never do that. And I know for a fact that they do it because of a lot of, let's say, caffeine or other things that they use as coping mechanisms to fill that gap. And again, it's for them, it's very circumstantial. They have to work hard in order to continue providing for their family, continue being the best versions of themselves that they can be. But I think what they sometimes neglect is things like sleep. And I think that's one of the biggest things, if I can recommend for folks listening. Sleep, sleep, sleep. I can't emphasize that enough. It really hits that reset button on your brain. It stops aging as rapidly as you would go through. I mean, there's a lot of course, benefits and getting a proper night's sleep. I know they recommend 8 hours, but really, I think a busy lifestyle can get away with 6. And I think especially if you couple it with maybe a 20-minute nap throughout the day, you're golden. I think, going back to your initial question of whether you perform optimally if you're neglecting certain parts of your needs as a person, I don't think so. Personally, for me, I can't skip it. For example, sleep. A lot of the times I have discovered a way through mixed martial arts and kickboxing specifically to get out my anger, my energy. I feel like everyone goes through it, of course, and they have different ways of coping with it, different ways of channeling that kind of energy. For me, it's kickboxing. I love it. But when I'm done with my training, I come back feeling a lot calmer. I feel like that's one thing I can't skip out on. I don't do it every day. I do it, at least once a week. But that's enough for me to get out that kind of energy and kind of really recenter myself back into who I feel like I am and want to be on a day-to-day basis. But I don't know. I think once you discover the things that you want to do and that you're starting to manage your life in a way where you want to be as a person, I wouldn't recommend skipping out on those things. And I think developing it and kind of adding that to your day-to-day routine will definitely pay dividends in the long run. It may not, again, it may seem like you're procrastinating, let's say professionally, but it pays huge, huge dividends later on down the line when you are retired in the age of 50 and 60, that you're not really seeking medical attention, but you're seeking those experiences that you've always thought yourself to have in, when you were 20, when you were 30, and you didn't get that chance. You didn't have that money. You didn't have that time to actually get out there and do those things. But now you're in that shape physically, at least. Let's say if you continue working out on a regular basis, when you are in that 30s, that you can get those hikes. It's very, going a little bit off topic. It was very inspirational. Recently, I did a 10K marathon, and you wouldn't believe it. The top 10 folks out of 210 folks that participated in the 10K, and thousands of people that participated in the 5K and the 2.5K and whatnot, most of them were over, or seemed like they were over 50. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I definitely anticipate, and that was my first marathon, so I didn't know what to expect. I went without expectations. But what I gained coming out of that is that these folks dedicated time to get to where they are, well ahead of where they are now. And that they are able to perform physically, at least, not optimally at that age. Whereas, for my immediate family members, when I turn to them and I look at them, I'm like, there's no way they can run a marathon right now. And of course, I'm not looking down on them. I'm not blaming them. I just know that there's a reason as to why you have the two ends of the spectrum. On one corner, you have someone who gave it their all physically throughout multiple years that led them to where they are, that they are performing optimally. People that, in their 30s and their 40s and their 20s are not living up to the standards that they are at that moment. But that takes years of hard work, years of dedication, years of consistency to actually get to that point. And it just all boils down to your day-to-day decisions. So ultimately, I mean, that's personally my kind of philosophy in life, where you see yourself in 2 years, 3 years, 1 month, you got to take those actions now in order to get there. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me. It kickstarted my passion into running, where I'm like, maybe this is, this aerobic sport is a sustainable sport, especially going through, chronic back pain and stuff like that. I don't really have that many choices of what I want to do in terms of exercises. So running has been really therapeutic mentally, physically. I find my stamina, endurance is getting better, and that's obviously trickling down on my day-to-day basis. What we do at Adventure Outdoors is a lot of manual labor, and I feel like it's translating into that. I can tell my strength and all that. That's just, it's very good. If you're enjoying something you're doing, don't stop doing it. Continue it as long as it's legal and you're not hurting someone. Keep on keeping on, and that's kind of the philosophy that I'm going through here as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And first of all, congratulations on the 10K. I mean, that is, that's a personal milestone, and that, that needs to be celebrated for sure. There's quite a bit of in what you said, how some people can get up and, have 2 hours of sleep and still go. I remember working many years like that. I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be going to bed around, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'd be doing it all over again. And again, there's two key components to that, right? Obviously, there's stimulants, but you have to have a reason. When your why is high, your cost is low. So for those people that, they want to run those marathons when they're 50, 60, 70, I mean, they already knew long ago that that's what they wanted to do. I think one of the biggest issues we have right now is that we don't have that kind of clarity. I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't have true clarity on what I really what I really wanted to do and where I wanted to go until after I was 30 something, and in a lot of ways that's the norm now. There's just so many choices. There's so many paths. We're told what we want by advertisers every day. We're told what we need by advertisers every day, and it just clouds everything. So one of the important things for me and for everybody is just get clarity in your own life. Because if you don't have that, then, you're not able to make those decisions. yesterday or today.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I agree with everything you just said. I feel like sometimes the system creates this trap, this loop of you're doing the right thing by following this kind of system. And then you get trapped in this bubble that you soon some folks soon, some folks years later realize that maybe it's not the most healthy lifestyle to be living. Right. I mean, I think we can all attest that 2 to 4 hours of sleep is just not healthy. And it's not just my personal opinion, it's backed by science. Right. There's many studies done. And because of that, there's an average time to sleep. Here's how long you should be sleeping. But like you said, I mean, I'm sure it was by circumstance, Chris. It may not have been a choice for you to get that kind of a sleep pattern. You know, I'm sure you had a lot going on in life. At the same time, I think, and forgive me for saying this, I think at some point it turns out to also be a choice in a lot of ways. You know, you may have had that choice to sleep a little bit earlier. You may have had a choice to wake up a little bit later. And I don't mean choice in terms of what you were doing imminently at that time of your life. You know, one thing I do want to bring up, and I have been doing this for a very long time, and I think it's really helped me accelerate my personal growth, if nothing else. When I felt like it was time to move on from something, I didn't shy away from it, right? For example, I'll give you an example. My car sales career, I was in it for over 3 years. I did it. I was really good at it. I was told every single day how good I was. I continued it until I was like, you know what? I don't see myself doing this anymore. And to the detriment of the company, I left. And I left cold turkey. Like, I didn't tell anyone. I just packed up my office. I said goodbye to the customers that I was serving at that time. And I just left. Didn't tell I told one manager who is to this day a personal friend of mine. He was a mentor of mine at that time. He still continues to be a mentor in many ways to me. Fantastic guy. Matt, shout out to you. Much love to you. And I hope we connect soon. And congratulations on your wedding coming up. Just wanted to put that out there. But besides that, I only told him and I just left. I left. And that was one of the best decisions I made in my entire life. Entire life. Because really, I felt like I was in that trap. I had no time for family. I had no time for social time. I had no time for my fitness journey. I had no time, period. I had no sleep, period. And, you know, as a result, it's hard to see on camera, but I have white hair now. I should be having white hair because no one else in my family has white hair. Okay, you said a lot without saying anything there. But yeah, and so leaving that job was one of the best decisions I ever made. And I went cold turkey and I thought, you know what, this is worst case scenario. I don't have a job lined up. I don't have anything that anything that I'm doing. Like, what am I doing? I'm just quitting a job without any backup plan. And that's the trap I'm talking about, where your mind starts making excuses to keep you in that loop. No, don't quit until you have another job. Well, if you don't really take the time to figure out what that job is going to be next, you're still going to continue to be in that state of stress, in that state of what if, in that state of don't do it. No, your brain, your body is clearly telling you this is not it for you. So just leave that circumstance. Move on to the next thing. What's that next thing? You don't have to plan it while you're suffering. You can plan it when you have all that time that you had previously invested in your previous job. And that's exactly what I do. When I feel like I've had enough of something, and that was really the first time I exercised that right, I stop it. I take the time that I need, sometimes months, from car sales to my next profession and my next career. It took me 4 months roughly. I think it was more 5, to be honest, to get to that next job. Now, that doesn't mean throughout that 5 months I was sitting there procrastinating. You know, I had other side gigs going on. I had other ways of bringing income. I did Uber for a long time. Right, that 4 or 5 months, I was doing Uber, I was doing Instacart, I was doing Corner Shop. There was a bunch of different delivery services that had a car. I said, you know what? I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to learn about people. My intention behind it wasn't just money. I mean, I was like, I can survive. I can survive until the next job without having to do anything. But I just felt bored. I was like, I want to learn about the real world. I spoke to people, I created that network through delivering those high-end clientele sometimes that, very good people, lots of life lessons that I learned. And so again, a lot of people look down on jobs like that, look down on entrepreneurs like that, because a lot of folks, they like Turo, for example. I know some folks there that have 10 cars that they rent out. That to me is a business. I mean, what's the definition of business? You have, first of all, that's sure in a lot of ways could be looked at liability, but really it's an asset. You're buying a car and other people are paying for it. And eventually you sell it and make money off of that. Not only are you making money off of renting them. I mean, anyone can do that. Start renting your car, especially if you're a stay-at-home. Increase the number of cars you have. No one's stopping you, right? At the same time, what is stopping us are own thought processes, our own trap that I'm talking about here, our own bubble that we set for ourselves, which leads to that rabbit hole of loss of sleep, stress, loss of hair gain, weight gain. There's so much that comes with it that is so unhealthy for you. But at the same time, people continue to accept that. I mean, finding jobs right now is harder than it's been for a very, very long time, right? Very, very, very long time. And I'm not saying, quit, because finding jobs is uncertain. And other ways of getting income could be a lot harder than before. But if you believe in yourself enough, and this is my personal philosophy, you believe in your skills, in your knowledge, you can do it. And you don't have to be stuck in that bubble and that trap. Sure, circumstantially, you may have kids. Having kids is very expensive. You may have a mortgage, you have car payments, all these bills. All together, you just can't afford to go into a next job. Well, if you set yourself up now, you can do that a year from now. And that goes back to day-to-day decisions. What you do on a day-to-day can set you up to that freedom of choosing what you want to do, to that freedom of having a personal life, to that freedom in general, is to just not be in that state that you don't want to be in anymore. I mean, to me, that's the definition of prison. That's the definition of jail. Doing something you don't want to do on a day-to-day basis. You're trapping yourself in a lot of ways, right? Again, a lot of the time circumstantially, and I may not be saying the right things, and I may sound offensive to a lot of folks that are listening right now. I don't mean offense. It's much love and respect for everyone that does what they do on a day-to-day basis. What I am trying to say is, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you don't have to be stuck in that loophole. You can get out of it. Sometimes it takes planning. Sometimes you can act on it right away. But my philosophy in that is the sooner the better, right? No one deserves more stress than they need to go through on a day or they want to go. Everyone has a capacity for certain things they want to do, certain things that bring about stress, that bring about calmness in a lot of ways, in a lot of sense. And they really need to act on those urges that their body's saying, their spirit, their mind, their finances in a lot of ways. A lot of people don't think they deserve more financially, so they don't ask more. They settle for a job. I know a lot of people personally, my family members who do, I know their potential and it's great, but they settle for a job that they're way overqualified for. And they do that for years and years. And I find myself asking why. You have so much potential. Tap into it. Learn more on how to assimilate, let's say in the Canadian culture, if you haven't done so already. I can keep touching up on this topic, but really the summary in this is, you don't have to be stuck in that trap. You don't have to be stuck in that loop. There are ways, sometimes imminently, rarely, in my case, imminently, at least in that car sales. But in a lot of the times, the luxury is not there imminently, but you can plan it today. You can start looking at ways today to have that income, at least a bare necessity to cover your expenses, in order to move on and evolve into someone you see yourself versus someone who you are now. That's definitely a piece of experience, a piece of adventure that I went through, at least 4 months later, that it really brought a lot of clarity into what I wanted to do. Took me out of that burnout that I felt like I was in at that point. It brought me solace. It brought me, you mentioned and touched up on a clarity. It brought me that clarity that I needed to get to where I am now.
Well, Thank you for sharing all that. And you're right. I mean, it is this bubble that we put ourselves in. Sometimes it's, we say we have to work these long hours because the job is going to fire us, or, whatever the case may be. But the truth of the matter is that if you are performing in your job to a high capacity, they're not going to replace you. So that is a legitimate fear. But let me tell you, personal experience, it is a lot easier to say no to your job and, take that quote unquote risk than it is to, spend 5 years of your life or 6 years of your life not seeing your family. And, usually they're the reason you're working and you wind up almost losing.
Yeah.
So, that's just the reality of it. We do all these things for these reasons, but, we need to remember that, maybe your reason is more, and that's fine. Maybe your goal is to get that $1 million, or that goal is to get just the what you need to survive. But that is another topic I did want to, quickly touch on, is that there's a difference between more and enough. And everybody needs to decide today, not tomorrow, not next week. They need to decide today what is enough for them. Because if you go after this more, you're just going to burn out. You're just going to proverbially, kind of like Icarus flying too close to the sun, melts his wings and he crashes and burns. Been there, done that. I should sell the t-shirt because then I get something out of it. but, but, no, it's definitely something we all need to consider. And again, maybe your enough is $20 million in a private island. That's fine. Maybe your enough is just enough to cover your bills. But whatever it is, you need to decide that today. What is?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise you get trapped. It's a trap. And before you know it, you're 40, 50, 60, and you're like, you know what? I've been doing this for so long. Only a few more years and I retire. Well, even at that point, you can stop. Again, science shows that every 5 years, you are not where you were 5 years ago. And your life drastically changes. But a lot of people sit there and believe more in destiny than fate, which are two different things, right? I believe that you can change both. And that starts from your day-to-day decision. You can't get to that destiny that you foresee for yourself. But you can't get there by saying, you know what, I'm gonna let life take the steering wheel. No, you gotta take the steering wheel. If you see yourself running a 10K marathon at the age of 60, well, you better act like that right now. Because you won't be able to when you're 60 if you don't act on it every single day, right? And you don't have to go for a run every single day. You can do it twice a week. Right? You can do it once a week. A lot of people, they just work out 2 to 3 times a week and that's enough for them. And they're fit, they're healthy, they're happy, and that's all that matters. But you can do that with every facet of your life, right? Just do a little bit to tend to those parts of yourself to live a sustainable life. And it goes back to what you said, like burnout is real. And, like a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of people live in that state on a day-to-day basis. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it is a choice. And you can sit there and say, no, I'm going through a circumstance. Yes, you do, but you can prepare on how to get out of that. And that's my point. You can't get out of it with a solid plan. You can't get out of it with support, right? Family, friends. There's always someone, there's always resources. If family and friends are not an option, the government provides fantastic resources. And if you plan it right, if you learn how to, you can get to the step in your life where you see yourself. And I guess that's, to add more to what I said earlier, you can get out of that. And you can get out of that state of being in a burnout, which, in a lot of ways I'm going through right now. And again, I have different ways of coping with that. And it's working for me. I feel great, at least personally. And it's helping me cope with all that. And you can get out of it too. And you certainly can. I do believe in that. I do believe in potential of everyone. I know it sounds utopian, but I really, really do. And I truly do. And I think everyone has a certain potential that they set for themselves. Forget about what people think. And if you strive to get there, one day you just kind of manifest it and the universe brings that about. It's weird how it works, but really ultimately at the core of it, you're the one making it happen. If you're envisioning it, but if you act on it on a day-to-day basis and stay consistent with it, you will get to that destiny and that fate that I'm referring to here. But it starts with day-to-day, what I call micro decisions. You have to make every second conscious decision to get to that point that you see yourself.
Very well said. Very well said. We are coming up close to the time here, Uzzi. It's been a great conversation. Do you think that there's anything that I could have asked that I should have asked, but I didn't, or anything that we should have covered that we didn't cover today?
No, I mean, you asked some fantastic questions. Forgive me if I speak a lot. My partner always says, give me a chance to speak. But there is so much that I feel like, I can help folks, and hopefully I've inspired that one person to just get out and get at it and do the things that they want to do it in a way where they enjoy it. I don't think you've missed out on any questions that are pertinent to the show. Folks are free to reach out to me if they have any further questions, and I'll be happy to connect for sure.
That sounds great. And, just before we do go, what is the best way for our listeners to maybe get in touch with you if they have a question or want to get to know more?
Yeah, great question. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm active there. Uzzi Sultoni would be my name. There's only one, I think, so shouldn't be hard to find. Or you can go to my Instagram, Happy Uzzi. I'll be happy to connect through there as well. But those would be, or my email, uzzi@adventure-outdoors.ca. I'm always active there as well. But I'm sure if there's a will, there's a way. Google me and I'll pop up.
Okay, well, and just to all our listeners, as usual, don't worry about grabbing a paper or pen or trying to rewind this episode later, because we are going to upload the recording as well, because we will have it in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Uzzi. It's been a real pleasure. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for listening. And just remember, if you can't find that inspiration or motivation for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Appreciate it. Thanks again, Chris. And